3 of the NRB conference. We're with our beautiful hosts at Endgame Press, and today we actually have the delight of the CEO itself, herself, Victoria Duerstock with us. I'm not trying to give you pronouns, I promise.
You know, I thought those are important nowadays.
I'm not politically correct here.
That's okay. Neither am I.
And Ezra from
CSN Radio. I'm also the host of Face Down, both on the Effect Radio Network and the CSN Radio Network, about 400 stations nationwide.
Wow.
He really needs to stop being so lazy.
I know. You need to stop this.
Yeah, pick up the slack, Ezra.
But I was asking you about you, and you were on a roll. So now you may continue on that roll. And tell us a little bit. Then we'll tell you about Endgame Press and all the wonderful things that
I want to talk to you guys
Victoria's
because
done.
publishing is really important to me. I was homeschooled. I was a writer for a while. I never got anything published, but you know.
Oh, you're talking to homeschool folk.
But something I've seen is that when I was growing up, all of the stories, I mean, the best example I've got is the Harry Potter series, where J.K. Rowling famously said, if you read the Bible, you would have known where I was going with this story. And I think on a good day, she's an agnostic, if not a devout atheist, but even she understood the power of the biblical story. My generation, this younger generation, doesn't have that anymore. The stories on the you walk into a Barnes & Noble, I challenge you to find a story that even tangentially has a biblical value in it. Even like hidden in there, you can't find it anymore. Even Dr. Seuss had some biblical values to it.
Yeah.
But nowadays, we don't see any of that at all because there is this concerted effort and this concerted hate for biblical values to where they're stripping it out of everything, out of the cartoons, out of children's literature, out of adult literature even. And so I love publishing companies like this. I love talking to you guys because you're really at the front line of that kind of culture war because kids and what they're reading is that front line. You know, we can talk a lot about how, Target is doing something or Bud Light is promoting Dylan Mulvaney. And that's well and good and those battles need to be fought. But the reason we have to fight those battles now is because there weren't people like you fighting that battle 20 years ago.
Well, Victoria, why don't you speak into that? And why is she CEO and founder of this, and she felt the need?
Well, I do. I think that's part of the mission, right? Is we want to be salt and light in the world as long as possible, which means we have to create family-friendly resources that maybe they don't know they're getting a gospel message coming in at them. And that's what just delights my soul. When I get to be able to say, how could we take this that we know is a Christian perspective, a Christian worldview, and how could we put it where we could get it into a hospital or into a Christian school or a regular school? How can we get it into a counselor's office?
Exactly.
And be able to make a difference and then draw them in, hopefully so that we can have gospel-centered conversations and hopefully lead a really dark, dark world that's getting ever darker.
That is exactly right. Yeah.
And what she's doing is the team of Endgame Press are all working authors, and Victoria's book,
very nice.
Yes, is a gold winner of the IPPY, which is a general market. So general market is a big deal.
It's been interesting because we've been able to get credibility, not just from the Christian marketplace and receive awards for the books that we're putting out, but also the general market contests are still giving us recognition. So a book like Navigating Minefields, which is actually based on the book of Proverbs, even though it doesn't say Proverbs 3:15 says, it's actually getting recognition right alongside an LGBTQ title and up for the same award. And that just thrills my soul.
And it is a great book. I've read it, and it's teenage boys.
Yeah, teenage boys.
It's an excellent book.
I think it's something to quality too, and a culture that sees only Christian media as something that has to be, people go with the assumption that it's going to be mediocre, and to be able to be in a general, right, and to see good quality, like a renaissance of Christian arts is really amazing to me to see in a production, and then also like publishing world,
Yeah. And what you hear constantly about Endgame Press and Victoria's selection of books and the way they look. I mean, seriously, this is my book, After the Thought, but it's a beautiful cover.
Yeah.
And then This is a Country of Their Own from Our Hope. And they're beautiful, well written books with, great words and stories.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be an attention to detail, and we have to have beautiful books. I've said it a couple of times. I can't have an ugly book.
Yes.
It's not within me to be able to say, yeah, let's put out an ugly book, or, well, that's just okay.
Yes, please, not another Christian book that is nothing but Getty Images covers.
And Comic Sans.
Oh my gosh, don't get me started on Comic Sans. Or Papyrus.
I do like Comic Sans. I'm sorry.
I liked Papyrus for a while, but I had to give it up. Yeah.
I had that phase too.
How do you? Oh, go ahead. How do you pursue excellence then with so many competitors in the general market?
I don't know, man. That is something that I've not been able to find an answer for myself yet. I went to Liberty University. That was our motto. If it's Christian, it should be better.
Yes.
And the joke on campus was, if it's Christian, it'll have technical difficulties. Yeah, because even at Liberty, we would occasionally have those problems. We had convocation 3 times a week, and we had a great worship session before each one. And still, we couldn't get the lyrics quite right.
The one that's delayed by a nanosecond.
Exactly. Or like the worship leader decides to ad-lib all of a sudden, and they're completely lost.
They're like they're like punching the thing, and the words are going
froze
right.
again.
And as a producer, I feel for those guys.
Absolutely.
But that is something that we as a church really need to be focusing on. And I think especially this approach where we're being strategic and we're not saying it's Christian out loud. Are you guys familiar with Matt Walsh at all?
Yeah.
He's been talking about this a lot lately.
Yes.
He's been talking about this a lot, where we need to be very strategic in how we are moving forward, because we decided to throw out strategy as a church before I was born. We just decided, well, if it's in the Bible, we'll say it all the time. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
That's right. It's not.
But because all we were doing was preaching, there were people who weren't in the choir who didn't want to hear any of it.
And then it became very resistant to it, right? It became a full force pushback, because if you're going to talk about God, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah. Right.
And VeggieTales was one of the first to really start turning that tide, I think, of being it was biblical stories. It made no...
Esther was the most beautiful asparagus.
I still sing the hairbrush song. I mean, I don't know, it's in my brain.
And your mother and I, God is bigger than...
I still picture Esther as asparagus. We'll talk about that later. Sorry.
But exactly, Phil Fisher talks about this, there were watch parties in regular colleges. Just a bunch of kids who had probably never been to church in years. And they were watching Veggie because it was good.
Yeah.
It was well done.
And the songs stay with you at 2 a.m. in the morning.
26 and 61.
And we had decided at some point as a broad movement that, well, does it really need to be good because it is spiritually good? Does it really need to be high quality? It's not like anyone was saying that out loud, but somehow that became the disposition. And so when I'm talking to kids nowadays, there's a common meme online where if you're talking about Christ at all, someone will eventually tweet back a picture of Christ being crucified and say, "Bro, is this your God?" And they say it in derision, what we see with great hope and love, because they don't have sacrifice was never taught to them. Real true love was never taught to them, either by their parents or just socially ingrained through the stories they read. They don't have these bedrock values to even understand Christ's sacrifice. So how can we expect to go to them and say, Christ died for your sins? If they don't know what that means at a fundamental level.
Yep.
And so it's stuff like this that I think is really very important to start working that back in. I remember, and I started coming to this when I was pretty young. My first job was out of McDonald's. And I was homeschooled, so I used big words because that's what I knew to do. And I used the word chivalry one time. And no one knew what I was talking about.
Except for the romance reader who was in the back of the line wanting a Big Mac.
What chivalry is. And one of the girls looks at me and she goes, "I wish my dad treated me like that."
Oh, wow.
And that was my first moment where I was like, wait, people actually don't know this. We've fundamentally failed as a church somehow. Where this is what we're... And I'm from a town of 6,000 out in Appalachia. It's a town of 6,000 with something like 15 churches. We should know this.
But you know what I've noticed about in-game, and I can't wait to delve into your network. And we had this with the school, the homeschool mother just recently. It's really about relationships, and that's what you try to foster in these books. It's about developing a relationship between the reader and the writer, and a larger picture than that. And I think that's something. Sometimes we give the good news without giving of ourselves, and it is, we treat it as a notch, or the agenda check off. And so I think this is the beauty of using media, such as these wonderful in-game press books and your networks to speak to that. Because I'm sure you have a lot of relationships that you've built with
with our listeners.
Yes.
Yeah. Our listeners are one of the most engaged listener bases I've ever seen. Because we vet everyone who comes on our station for biblical. I mean, we vet them. I will spend a good week going through someone's old sermons and their sermon notes and their videos, trying to find where they might not have a biblical idea in there. And so our people know when we put someone on the air that they can be trusted. We've got Greg Laurie, we've got Richard Ellis, we've got all of the greatest guys on there. And because of that, our listeners know that they can trust us.
That's an intentionality to detail as well, right?
And when we're talking about this, I think it's important to also say there is an importance of roles here. My role, I have a teaching program, right? I'm currently preaching through 1 Samuel. I just finished.
I'm reading 2 Samuel.
Yeah, I just finished a sermon series in the Book of Esther.
Nice.
That's my role that I believe God has given me, but everybody can't be an evangelist. Everybody can't be a teacher. And in the church, at least in my lifetime, there is this mode where everybody has to be that. No, some people can just be the people reaching out, be the people teaching our kids good values without having to bring the church into it explicitly, but always being undergirded by what Christ has done for us in a way that they cannot mistake who we are or where we're coming from.
And I know my church, and I know many churches that are doing this, we've learned that inviting people into the church is not working. And I think this is just another form of going out. In-game press is just another way of going out. Your network is just another way of going out, because you never know who's going to come across the dial.
Yes.
Or, pick up or someone, I don't know, I'm sure this has happened to you a lot. Oh, I gave your book to somebody.
Yeah.
Sure, right, because it's a gift, right? It becomes a gift, and it's a gift with a purpose many times, but we don't have to be preachy in our gifts, but maybe we do. It just depends. It depends on the person. We can have a variety of things. I think it's really interesting that it disarms us when we have an opportunity to pick up something.
That's all right. I'm so good.
Oh, you are. You're such a precious gem. But talking about those things, we're motivated by our faith, and that's why we do what we do, or else we would probably do something else a lot more fun or easier.
Yeah. Yeah. More money doing something else.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
And it's not about the money. I don't care about the money. I live pretty comfortably, but it's not gangbusters or anything.
No mansion in Bel Air?
No mansion, actually,
Just a Hollywood
People
Hills.
feeding
yeah, just the Hollywood. But we do have to be at a level where we need to be back in the culture.
Yep.
We have to be.
Well, we can't abandon it, right?
Yes.
I mean, the darkness will take over. If we abandon,
and we
who
see
will?
that already.
Yeah.
We almost segregate ourselves as, we're only Christian media versus being salt and light.
Whenever someone tells me that they're only Christian media, my question is, okay, then why are you doing evangelistic work?
It's a great question.
If you're only making stuff for Christians, which I think is a very good niche to be in, don't get me wrong. I think of a Fireproof and those films made by that church. I can't remember the name, but those were great pieces for the church. They weren't trying to be evangelistic.
Right.
And then I think of the God's Not Dead movie, which was trying to be evangelistic while also only having things for the people of God.
Yeah.
What's the intersection here?
Right.
You're hoping that some people in a church might bring their friends or convince their friends to come out.
Right.
How does that work?
Right.
When you're preaching at them the whole time. When you've made every non-Christian in the movie completely unlikable villains.
Right.
But you somehow have to root for their salvation. If you're only making things for the people of God, that is great. be teaching them, be expanding their knowledge of God.
Disciple making.
But if you're doing if you don't want to be doing evangelism, I get it, man. There are some of us that are not cut out for that work. I would consider myself one of those. I can't go up to someone on the street and effectively preach. That's just not my style. It doesn't come to me naturally. Like my boss, Pastor Kessler, he can do that any day of the week. You put him on notice. You're out on the street with him. You point at someone, and he will go off. He is an evangelist extraordinaire. That ain't me. And I know my place. And we, as the people of God, we have hands, we have feet, we have arms, we have all the different parts of the body, but we only really want to be the mouth. We only really want to be the hands. We don't want to do all that other stuff, but it is just as important.
The body of Christ needs to rise up in the way that God has gifted us.
Yes.
That's what you're saying. Well, we are running out of time, Ezra, but we are so grateful that you stopped by in Victoria.
We had church on
We had church
Thursday.
We needed it. We
Right
needed
here.
it.
Yeah.
But we do end our podcast, and we'll ask this of you with a question, which I think you've already brought it up, but I'll let you zing it.
Yes. Okay, so we've asked every guest this in our Moralty living room at the convention center. But
At the in-game press booth.
At the beautiful in-game press booth, yes. If you could ask any one question to the world, something that you would want curiosity to stir in their hearts, what would it be?
Any one question to everybody in the world, and I get an answer from everyone.
Well, no, the point is you get to ask it.
Yeah. But what do you want them to reflect on and think about?
That's a good question. Right now, if I had to ask one question of everybody in the world, it would be this. What values do you hold so dear that you're willing to fight for them?
Ooh.
We've received.
For us, that's a very easy question, right?
Yeah.
But for people who don't know God, I found that one's a bit of a stumper.
Yeah.
Because they think about it for a second, and usually what they settle on, and this is really interesting to me, usually when I ask this question and someone's not a Christian, they'll say, my kids, my wife, my family. I'll fight for that till the day I die. That's great. I'm glad we still have that instinct. I really am. Now, how do you do that? And you ask them that and they go, well, I mean, I make money and I provide for them if they're the men, or if they're the women, they usually say, well, I take care of my kids and I make sure they're healthy and they're well fed. I'm like, that's great. But don't you think they'll be a little sad? And they say, sad. I go, did you teach them how to love?
Right.
Did you teach them what hope is? Do you know what hope is? Did you teach them all the really important, those wonderful intangibles, like they said on Miracle on 34th Street, those wonderful intangibles of life? Have you taught them any of those? Or are you just trying to make sure that they're a healthy little widget?
That's a good end note. Ezra, how do we find your stations?
Absolutely. So you can go to csnradio.com, csnradio.com, the Christian Satellite Network, or you can go to effectradio.com. Those are our music stations, Christian rock alternative stations, and that is effectradio.com. And if you're looking for me, my show is on Spotify. You just search for Face Down. We're one of the first things that pops up right there.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We really appreciate it. And
it was great to
Victoria
talk to you
Duerstock,
guys.
we just
Thank you for letting me pop into the living room as well.
Well, thank
Bam
you.
Bam shindig.